Hello, I'm Dr. Owens of O2 Rehab Solutions, and this is the O2 Rehab Spotlight. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Miss Tiffany Thompson. She is speaking to us today from the point of view of a mental health counselor, and we will discuss the use of expressive therapies. Miss Tiffany Thompson is a school counselor and mental health counselor. She received her Master's of Counseling and Education from Indiana State University. She furthered her counseling education at Butler University, where she received her certification in clinical counseling. Tiffany is currently working on her doctorate in psychology education with a focus in expressive therapies at Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She has a certificate in dance therapy, a professional background, and degree in performance theater. She uses expressive and creative arts to help others heal from trauma. Additionally, she is an adjunct for the IUPUI University, where she teaches play and expressive therapy courses for Heron College and Counseling and Counselor Education College. She is an advocate for using culturally aware practices and is passionate about helping clients that have experienced trauma connected to the whole person using spiritual principles, empathy, and the arts. It's without further ado, I would like to formally introduce you to Miss Tiffany Thompson. To welcome you to the O2 Rehab Spotlight today. I want to thank you for taking the time to collaborate with us to talk to us about healthy ways that we can address some of our strain and stress related to the current events that are happening today. I'm excited to talk to you about the use of expressive therapy to do so. To get started, would you be willing to tell me a little bit more about your PhD studies?
Yes, and hi, Carla, and thank you so much for having me come join you today. It's been a pleasure to be able to do this. So what I'm working on in my PhD, I'm working on what is called expressive therapies. So
Yes.
expressive therapies is when you use anything like the art. So I'm looking at dance, drama, music, play, anything that deals with expressing yourself, those different modalities. In fact, there's a lot of different information out there on expressive therapies. And a lot of people may not be familiar with that. So it's kind of a new but old concept that's coming back up. So it's looking at ourselves holistically, looking at therapy from a holistic approach and how we can use other ways of healing ourselves. And so for my PhD, I'm looking at trauma, and particularly racial tension type trauma, post-traumatic slave syndrome, multigenerational trauma. I'm looking at that in people and in children and how we process it and what that looks like using expressive therapies. How can we use expressive therapies as a way to help us heal through this so that we can come together, unified under one spirit, one life, living together in harmony.
Before we jump in and we get in deep, I'm curious, this all kind of started, I don't know why I'm getting emotional.
Because it's a spirit thing.
It's a lot. This is a lot. But, this kind of all came about because a lot of us are on social media. And we are just trying to process all of this.
Yes.
And I sat back, I was a participant first of all, but then I sat back as an observer and I just saw pain. I see pain from the white perspective. I see pain from the black, brown, the yellow, the red perspective. And a lot of us are trying to figure out diligently, like how to deal with this, how to cope. And I posted something, I put a call to action out and you were right there. You were right there and you were volunteering yourself. And can you tell me a little bit about why this is important to you?
Oh, you're going to get me emotional.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to hold it together. I knew I was going to do this. I knew it. I've been doing it inside of this, okay?
This is all divine. This is all divine. I'm going to tell you, this is all spiritually divine. And this is for a moment like this. And I will say that when you put that up there, I had already been praying and asking, seeking my inner self, seeking God, seeking inside of me, like, what can I do? How can I help my people? Because I've seen this. I work in the schools. I've seen just the outpour of the trauma from years of like trauma from abuse and just different types of trauma that we experience as Americans, as people of color, as white people. All of us experience trauma. So I know we have different types of trauma and different things that have occurred to different people, but at the end of the day, we're all human. And this is human trauma.
Absolutely.
And you know, I got caught up too in the black and the white and the black trauma. And then I had to pull myself back and realize, you know what, this is all of our trauma. This is a human condition. This is a heart condition. And this is a heart condition. And so I was like, you know, God has given me expressive therapies. And I've used it on my own self to heal through some of my trauma, some of my hurts and pains. And in doing that, he showed me this is something that you need to share with the world. This is not something just for a time like this. This is something bigger than you ever could imagine. And so when I saw your post, I knew that it was a divine call to step up. And because I had already said, God sent us leaders, step them up. Where are the leaders at? And I had been crying for Hollywood, and I was like, where's the politicians? And God said, you are the leader. And so I was like, well, what does that mean? So when you put that post up, it was like, here's your opportunity to show that leadership. Here's that opportunity for you to give them a gift that I gave you to help them to see that this is bigger than them. This is bigger than everything they see. Disconnect. And he told me to disconnect and leave. And I'm like, disconnect and leave? What does that mean? And for months, he had been telling me to prepare and plan. And all these things have been happening. And even prior to all this, he kept telling me it's in the breath. It's in the breath. And a lot of what we do in expressive therapies goes back to the breath. It goes back to breathing, grounding, and supporting ourselves and going back into that inner self and that God spirit, that breath that he put in us, that spirit of love at the foundation, no matter what. And once we get into that and we hunker down in that, you know, it's funny, we keep using this word hunker down for the COVID, but the hunker down that he wants us to do is in him. And we need to hunker down in that spirit of God, that spirit of love, of forgiveness, of grace, of mercy, the spirit that we have been talking about as a church. This is the new church. He is starting a restoration. He is restoring his people. And the people who hear his voice will come. And the people who do not hear his voice will not come. So when you put that out there, I felt like this is my time to step up and let the world know that God has a plan. He always had one.
So for the viewers out there, so we can kind of connect the dots, Tiffany and I have messaged back and forth a little bit. And when she started discussing her PhD, her planning for her dissertation, she brought up a term. It's the abbreviation is PTSS, which stands for post-traumatic slave syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is that and what does it look like in society?
Yeah, so post-traumatic slave syndrome was actually a theory that has been developed by Dr. DeGruy. Mm-hmm. Dr. Joy DeGruy created this theory, and she wrote a whole book and dissertations and things all around post-traumatic slave syndrome. And before I got involved in mental health, I had never heard the term. I never knew nothing about it. And so I was very interested in what does this mean? And so I started reading and learning about it, and it took me all the way back to W.E. Du Bois, who talked about epigenetics. And so it started with the history, basically, of this country being set up on a history of oppression and looking at what that looks like in people, the trauma that they experience when they go through traumatic things. And so with post-traumatic slave syndrome, it's actually looking at the actual African-American experience in the trauma that we experience as African-Americans and Black Americans and Brown Americans. And so that trauma goes all the way back to Africa when the first slave was captured and brought over in 1619. And then as those slaves, that oppression continued to migrate. So we had the slavery, and then we had the slaves brought free, but they really was not free because they still had no jobs, no places to go. So then they end up being sharecroppers. And then, you know, the system became a system that was harsh for them to live in, where they had to steal sometimes for the needs of their family. And then you have the raping and the beating and all these things that occurred. And then we moved forward from the whole freedom of the slaves to now they're building their own communities and they're trying to be part of society. And then all of a sudden we get these new laws thrown on them, the Jim Crow laws, and then we burn down things like Tulsa, Oklahoma. We burn down the Wall Street.
Barrier after barrier after barrier after barrier.
After barrier, absolutely. So then we come to the 80s where we start to try to integrate. when we really have went through the 60s and we've had all the protesting and all the riots and all that. So then we go into the 80s and we're like, okay, we're together. We're all coming together. We're all in love. What has resonated with me is the sign came down, but they still didn't want us around because of that spirit. And when I say they is a spirit for me. They is not a white person. They is not a Jew or whatever. They is a spirit. They is a spirit. So that spirit did not want us around. And so what happened was people of color never had a chance to really work through their trauma, and neither did the white people who had done the things that they had done. So people, really humanity had not had a chance to heal. And so what happens with post-traumatic slave syndrome is that trauma is passed down from generation to generation. It's genetic, it's in our DNA. And so what occurs is when the people who have experienced the trauma or going through the trauma, they don't have time to process it. Like right now, we have so much going on with the COVID, this, and it's hitting us boom, 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 like we're getting beat up. We don't really have time to process it. It's just pain after pain after pain. And so what happened with the slaves is that the pain continued to build, but they never had a chance to really sit back, process it, and experience it and go through it and heal. Mm-hmm. And they have studies out there where they studied the actual Jewish Holocaust, mm-hmm. and they studied the Holocaust victims. So the people who went through the Holocaust, what they discovered was their children had more trauma and pain than the people who actually went through the Holocaust.
Now that's interesting. That's interesting to me. But I can kind of see it though. You don't have, like, we don't have time right now with what's going on to even process it. We're just reacting, trying to find the best path. But then I can see how later when you have a little more of a chance to breathe, maybe you are processing and you can internalize a little bit more.
Exactly. And that's what was happening. So with the Jews, what they discovered was their children had more trauma than the parents. And then the children's children had more. Because the longer you live through this, the more you have time to process it. As you feel like you're free, the more you have time to like really process what really happened. And as a physical therapist, I know you know all about muscle, how
memory. Muscle memory.
So it's similar to muscle memory. That memory is in our muscles. It's in our DNA. It's in our neurons. It's in our system. And so as we move forward, so that trauma is not only there for African Americans who experienced abuse, it's also there for the people who put the abuse. So those white people, I hate using like terms like white and black because I really believe that we are humans, and these terms were put up to break us up in society as a control mechanism and to divide, and we're falling forward, and we need to stop it. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. But as far as when we're looking at post-traumatic slave syndrome, the white people also have had some trauma from it, because now they carry that same spirit, I would say, that spirit to oppress, where the black people have been oppressed. So they carry that burden of that feeling beat down and never been able to get back up, and like just always feeling downtrodden. And the same thing happened to the Jewish people, but they were able to find a way out.
You know what else I think I see? Even if you're talking about somebody of the white race and they don't necessarily have an active desire to oppress, I think there is sometimes what I sense is a feeling of guilt, even though maybe you didn't directly do the assault or directly have an effect of how racism is so interwoven into our society. And then I think when we start having discussions, it's like I need to defend myself, or I feel so bad, and I think that sometimes gets in the way of the healing because of the emotional battle that not only that we are going through, but I think that people that happen to be white, they are kind of dealing with some things that are hard to navigate as well. And then it's like we get stuck,
And that goes back to that internal piece and us being able to individually heal. And that's why I keep telling people, this is not a war about race or religion or all these. This is an internal war. This is a battle of our own minds. And how do we take control of that? How we can take control of that psyche? And so with expressive therapies, one of the things that Dr. Sean McNiff, when he describes expressive therapy, he looks at it as the expressive therapies are those that introduce action to psychotherapy. And that action within therapy and life is rarely limited to a specific mode of expression. So you get that? So basically, we're looking at how do we put out what was in, and how do we get that pain, that trauma, like when we have no words. So with children, I've studied a lot with kids. And
I was going to say, what are like, I don't know what just happened. What are some like examples? Like, what does expressive therapy look like in a session?
So, for example, I've worked a lot with kids, and a lot of times with kids, they don't have the words to express their feelings. So they may have been, say, molested or raped or violated in some way. And so they can't really maybe express like the pain, the hurt, but they're acting out. So you see what? You see behaviors. The same thing we're seeing right now. You see behaviors because these are
protests and even riots or,
riots,
you know, at times,
all
you know?
All of it is behaviors. They're behaviors based on not ever getting whatever the thing is hurting us completely healed. And so we want to express it. We want to get it out. And so what expressive therapies does, and what I do, and how it looks in children, is that you take things that you have here that was given to us by our nature, by God, by creation. So you have music, you have poetry, you have dance, you have, I have music. So I have like this singing bowl, which this is actually is a thing to help ground you, to help you just remind yourself it's a sound, and it just helps to reconnect those neurons and to help you just be reminded to take a minute to stand still and stand back and to go within. And so with children, a lot of times we use those techniques, and we also, I may use what is called like art therapy concepts. So the child may draw out their feelings or emotions using different colors, different crayons. At the end of the day, the student is able to tell their story. That child is able to tell their story. And then once they get their story out, they feel like they was heard. Like right now, people are trying to get their story out. I'm hurting. We've been hurt. So I'm gonna crash something. I've been hurt. I'm gonna make a sign. I want to get my voice heard. So expressive therapy lets you get your voice heard in a creative way without making damage to someone else. It's something you do for yourself so that you can go back out into society and be a part of society and be able to explore that love and that joy and express those things to other people. But you have to go within to come without.
You know, you mentioned earlier, you were talking about trauma therapy, and you included racism in that. Is racism considered a form of trauma?
Anything that oppresses is trauma. And let me hear me out. Some people may not like this. Some people may get offended, but religion is a form of oppression, and it could be a form of trauma. Institutional systems can be, governmental systems can be a form of trauma, and it can put trauma on you because it's a form of oppression. Anything that oppresses you from being able to express who you are and express the ability to move through yourself can be traumatizing, and it can also cause damage. We may think we're doing good by telling people, oh, do how this is and how we should do this and that. But at the end of time, it comes back to us, our internal heart, and where we feel and how we felt in that process. And we all experience different processes differently. And with racism, because it's looking at someone's skin tone, something that they cannot change, something that they had nothing to do with, and to tell them that you're bad because you're Black. Or to tell, and when you look at a religion, to tell people you're bad because you're Muslim, or you're bad because you're a Christian. Whenever we start to judge and put those judgments out there, we bring oppression and hurt and pain. And when that oppression and hurt and pain comes out, it comes out many times violent, or it comes back out as oppressed people who hide in their house and don't come out. So there's a technique, there's a technique that's called the 5 steps. It's a dance, using dance therapy. So dance therapy is something. So the 5 rhythms. So in the 5 rhythms, there's different types of rhythms that are utilized in this form of dance. And so you're looking at like creating different dimensions. So you may create waves. You're creating waves to get change. So there may be some chaos in that. There may be some grounding in that. And this kind of goes back to what I was going to talk about, like how can people help themselves, like during this time. You know, I know we talked about how can people help themselves and what things can they do when they're trying to help channel that energy in a different way, because it's just like physics, you know, exert something, something's going to come back. It's physics 101. And so now we have all this time that not just Black people, but the community has felt oppressed by the government, by the politicians, by the police, by the different systems that have been infrastructured in here. And we've been pretty much hijacked. And we've been told to sit down at this moment, sit down, stay in your house, and we're going to send the guard out to make you stay in your house.
So the situation is compounded. You know, we have two major events going on all at one time. We have the socioeconomic stressors. We have the disparities that are also layering it on, especially for minorities, and that we are being affected and losing more family members and loved ones to this COVID-19 compared to other people. And then we watched George Floyd killed in the middle of the street during the day, and there's police involvement surrounding that whole scenario, and it's just too much.
It is.
All at once, and it's like
it's the perfect chaos.
Yeah,
it's the perfect chaos. And so we've all went through the chaos. We were going through the chaos, and we will continue to go through the chaos. But now it's like we see the chaos, we know what's happening. How do we pull back? How do we?
I can tell you kind of what I've been doing. Like, literally, I have, you know, as we've talked about briefly in the beginning, some days I've just cried about it. And then I thought to myself, there's got to be healthier ways to deal with this. So there have been times where Carmen and I, we have just walked together. My daughter and I, we have kind of talked it out. And I guess this may be a form of expressive therapy for me, is trying to have dialogue and trying to equip people with tools so that they can navigate this thing a little bit more easily as well, because we're struggling. So, you know, can you talk more specifically about things that maybe our audience is that they will be able to try, that they will be able to integrate into their daily lives, so that we're sending people away with tools?
Yes. So one of the things that I would like to talk about, like I said, is creating a new narrative. I always say we need to create a new narrative. So the narrative we've been sold is a narrative of repression. We realize that. So how do we change that narrative? That narrative is each person has their own story to tell. Each person has their own struggle. Each person has felt suppressed or oppressed many times in their life, whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're a woman, whether you're Jew, whatever that may be, you have felt suppressed or oppressed in some form. And so how do we now, with Black people who I will definitely say have had a lot of oppression, and I'm not going to ever take from that oppression that has happened to Black Americans, and I know that they're struggling really, really, really bad with this. And what we need to do now is go back to the basics. What is the basics? We need to strip everything that we knew. We need to abandon everything we was ever taught, education, religion, society, everything we was ever taught, and go back inside ourselves and seek out that internal spirit that's in us, that Christ spirit, that God spirit, that creator spirit, whatever that spirit is. We need to go with inside. We need to sit with that. We need to allow those emotions to flow. So one of the activities that I think that people can do just in their own home, and that I can even show you to do, is what I like to do is called a grounding exercise. Because right now we all need to get grounded.
Let's try it. Grounded. I've never done this before.
How this works, yes. So how this works is, how this works is, I just need you to sit with your feet on the ground, because I need you to feel the ground beneath you. I need you to feel your seat beneath you, like feel your body, your bottom sitting on the seats.
Should I close my eyes?
Yes, close your eyes was the second thing. So close your eyes, and I want you to sit there in this feeling. Then I want you to go back, and I want you to go into the breath. And as you go into your breath, I want you to take a deep breath in. Take one deep breath in, and then exhale. And I want you to do this about 3 times. Just taking slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And as you sit in this, I want you to just let your thoughts just wander. Your thoughts of frustration, your thoughts of pain, your thoughts of anger, all those negative thoughts. I want you to sit with those negative feelings. Think about all the stuff that's happening, the horrible things that are happening to people, to humankind, the utter destruction that is going on in our country, in our world. Just think about all those things, and think about your ancestors. Some of those who may have been slaves, some of those who may have been slave owners, some of those who may have been native to this country that was ripped out of it. think about and connect to that pain that they went through. Think about that pain. And I want you to, as you're thinking through this pain and feeling their pain and feeling that energy, I want you to take deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And then I want you to start to give gratitude to yourself and gratitude to your internal spirit for the love. And I want you to start to feel and picture the love, your heart opening up forgiveness for all the pain that your ancestors have endured, for all the pain that is happening right now. I want you to just push out love from your heart. Allow your heart to take all that pain and manipulate it with love. Come back with love, because love is the just of all things. And as you sit in love, you may feel the presence of the sun shining on you. You may feel that heat from the sun, the warmth of the sun, just filtrating through your body. Just feel the sun. And think about the best place that you've ever been. Maybe it's the beach, a peaceful place. And just start to give gratitude and give thanks for what you do have. Your children, your daughter, your family, your career, your life, your breath. Just think about all the pleasurable things, the great things you do have. And as you deeply dive into that breath and you begin to breathe in joy, breathe in love, breathe in happiness, breathe in all that the universe and God has made for you to enjoy. I want you to push that same energy, that same breath back out to the world, because we need it. We need that energy. We need that exhale. We need you to just feel yourself filling with the spirit of love. Just continue just to say thank you for the spirit of love. And as you inhale that spirit of love, I want you to just feel it warming you, wrapping itself around you, just letting you see that you are loved and you are loved. And that same love that you have, you can share it without and with others. But focus in on the love of self, the love of people, the love of being able to have this human experience. And as you focus back in on love, you can start to give it back out.
And how often is this a form of meditation? Is that what you're teaching me today?
Yeah, it's a simple form of meditation. It's a form of mindfulness, like being more aware, being more mindful of who we are, what we're doing, our intentions. And so after you do an activity like this, then you can set your intention. So you could maybe go, right, what is my intention?
Mm-hmm.
And your intentions, you start to change. So what in the process is happening is you're starting to create your own narrative. You're creating a new narrative against the norm. The normal narrative is to sit around with your pain and anger, go out and do something crazy, But now we got time to process, sit back, go through the pain, feel the pain, because pain is real, anger is real, those emotions are real, but you don't have to stay there. You don't have to live in that space. You can go back always to the comfort of love and the comfort of gratitude. And it's better to live in comfort of love and gratitude than it ever is to live in that space of anger and frustration. And then once you clear your mind with the space of love and gratitude, then you can actually put a plan together, a plan that is coming from a place of love versus a pain of anger, madness, and hate. And that plan is going to be way more sufficient than any other plan that we could think of. Another grounding activity, other than just sitting there and thinking, is to also go outside and connect with the earth. Like even going outside barefoot and connect back to what we came from. Because like I said, we got to go back to basics. So even going outside, standing in the grass, putting your feet in the grass, surrounding yourself with plants, things that are alive.
It's funny that you say that. It's funny that you say that, because for me, everybody doesn't know this, but the people that really know me, they know that I love plants. I love to garden. I love to grow. I love to take something this big and make something beautiful. And I would say that's one of the moments that I feel closest to God, is when I am in my garden, and planting things, or when I am out in nature, walking and just looking at the beauty of the world. But it's so interesting that you said gardening, because that is my thing. That is naturally my thing.
And I'm telling you, that's what we got to do. We got to go back to basics. And when you say you feel closest to God when you do that, because you're taking, you said it perfectly. You said, I'm taking something small and making it grow. God is a creator. Remember that. He's a creator. He gave us all that same creative spirit. And once we suppress that creative spirit and we stop creating, we stop losing touch with him. And that's what's happening. We're starting to lose touch with who he is and who he created us to be. We are people of creation and to create.
Tiffany, you are awesome. And I really, really, really want to thank you for giving us your time today, taking a moment to share with us some of the things that you have learned, teaching us a little bit more about what expressive therapy is, how we can utilize it in our lives, and helping us, again, just to navigate through some of this ugliness that the world is experiencing right now, our nation particularly is experiencing right now. I thank you so very much.
Yes, anytime. Like I said, I'm coming from a place of love for our people, not just Black people, not just white people, for humankind. We are in a battle right now for our souls, for our spirit. And I see it and I feel it. And I want us to know that there is a plan and there is a place that we can go. And that's the place of love.
Well, thanks for being a part of the solution, Tiffany. Thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to put my voice out there.
Of course, anytime.
Hey guys, don't jump off too fast. Keep watching. We are going to provide some information here at the end of resources. Tiffany, I want to say thank you for giving us the time. Thank you for talking and educating us about expressive therapies and providing us with positive outlets to dealing with emotions. With everything that's going on right now, it is overwhelming with COVID-19, with race relations in America. A lot of us are overwhelmed, myself included, and I definitely plan on using some of the skills that you have provided us with today. I would like to remind everybody that Tiffany is not operating as our counselors today. She is operating as a resource, and she is educating us on tools that we have out there. So she is not operating as our counselors. So I would encourage each and every one of you that have identified yourselves as wanting to delve further in expressive therapies or counseling, period. Start with your healthcare companies. Call them and tell them that you have interest and if they can give you referrals. Another thing I want to address is it was brought to my attention with a social media conversation that because disparities target minority groups in particular, that many people don't have access, whether it is no insurance, underinsured, can't afford the co-pays, whatever the barrier may be, transportation, getting to and from, whatever the barrier could possibly be, the things that contribute to health disparities in America for minority individuals. So because of that, I want to ask about pro bono services. I was questioned if I knew anybody that's offering that type of service, and I do not. And so I'm posing it to all of you. If you are certified, if you have license and are qualified to provide these types of services, please list your information below. I'd like to add a little caveat to that. Many of us with licenses, we are bound by the state that we carry a license in under normal circumstances. So for all of my viewers, if people do provide this information and you are wanting to partake in it, match yourself up based off of where you live. Okay, you need to pick people that live in your location so that they are in compliance with state regulations and are able to provide you with the service that you need. So hopefully that will help eliminate some of the confusion that can arise if we're just picking people randomly. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning into the O2 Rehab Spotlight today. I hope that you found it valuable, and until we meet again.